You don't even know who the father is." Those were the words that shattered Emily Carter's world. Nicholas Hale, the ruthless millionaire CEO she had once trusted with her heart, looked her in the eyes and smirked with cold arrogance. He didn't believe her. He didn't believe the child growing inside her was his. That night, Emily walked away in silence, clutching her belly, vowing never to let her son know the pain of rejection. For 2 years, she raised her boy in quiet strength, hiding from the man who had humiliated her. But fate has a cruel way of circling back. On a rainy afternoon, Nicholas Hale's eyes fell on a little boy in the crowd. The child's features froze him to his core. In that instant, the truth struck like lightning. He didn't need a test. He didn't need proof. The boy was his. Emily Carter stood frozen in Nicholas Hale's office, her trembling hands gripping the edge of her coat. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times in her mind. The soft announcement, the trembling smile, the hope in her chest that maybe, just maybe, this would be the thing that healed the cracks in their fragile relationship. But instead, all she got was a smirk. Nicholas leaned back in his leather chair, the skyline of Manhattan glowing behind him like a cruel stage light. His voice was calm, almost playful, but every word felt like a dagger. "You don't even know who the father is, Emily." Her lips parted, but no sound came. For a moment, she thought she misheard him. That maybe the stress of running a billion-dollar empire had warped his mind, but the gleam in his cold gray eyes told her otherwise. He meant it. He didn't believe her. Emily's throat tightened. "Nicholas, it's yours. This child is yours." But he only chuckled, that arrogant, dismissive laugh that once charmed investors and crushed rivals. "Convenient, but do you expect me to believe that without proof? You think carrying a child gives you power over me?" The room spun. She wanted to scream, to cry, to break something, anything to wipe that smirk off his face. But instead, she did the only thing she could. She turned. She walked out. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, each step heavier than the last. She pressed her palm against her belly, feeling the faint stir of life inside. A single tear escaped, but she brushed it away before the receptionist could see. No one would see her break. Not him, not his world, not anyone. That night, she packed. No goodbyes, no explanations. She left New York behind like a ghost, disappearing into the shadows of small towns and nameless roads. 2 years passed. Her life was no longer skyscrapers and silk gowns. It was playground swings, midnight fevers, and bedtime stories. Her son, her beautiful boy, had his father's eyes, that same stormy gray that Nicholas carried. Every time she looked into them, her heart ached with both love and fury. She had built a new life, one without power and wealth, but full of warmth. Her son never asked about his father. Not yet, and Emily prayed that day would never come. But fate, cruel as ever, had other plans. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, Nicholas Hale was leaving a charity event downtown, his security detail trailing close behind. He was older now, sharper, his empire bigger than ever. Yet when his gaze swept across the street, it froze. A boy, a small boy with messy dark hair, chasing a red ball down the slick pavement. And when the child looked up, Nicholas stopped breathing. Those eyes, his eyes. The world tilted, his chest constricted. For the first time in years, Nicholas Hale, the man who feared nothing, felt powerless. He knew he didn't need a DNA test. He didn't need Emily's words. That little boy was his blood, his son. And suddenly, Nicholas Hale realized the one thing money, power, and arrogance could never erase: the truth. Nicholas Hale was not a man easily shaken. He had survived financial crashes, cutthroat boardroom wars, betrayals from business partners who once called themselves brothers. He had been called ruthless, heartless, untouchable, and for years, he wore those titles like armor. But that night after the charity event, armor meant nothing. He sat alone in his penthouse, the city lights burning beneath him like an ocean of fire. His glass of bourbon sat untouched on the table. His reflection in the window stared back, hollow-eyed, restless. He had seen that boy's face 100 times in the past few hours. Every blink, every silence was filled with those gray eyes. His eyes. For the first time in years, Nicholas whispered a truth he could no longer deny. "He's mine." The words tasted like ash. He leaned forward, elbows digging into his knees, fingers pressed against his temples. His mind scrambled for logic, explanations, denials. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe Emily had found someone else. Maybe his brain was tricking him. But deep down, Nicholas knew. No boardroom deal, no $1 million lie could erase the truth of blood. That boy was his son. And suddenly, Nicholas found himself haunted. He saw flashes of what he had thrown away, Emily standing in his office, her voice trembling, her hands over her stomach. His own words, sharp and cruel. "You don't even know who the father is." How many nights had she cried because of him? How many mornings had she woken up alone, carrying not just her pain but his child as well? The guilt sliced through him, sharper than any hostile takeover. He could silence rivals. He could buy politicians. But he couldn't silence the truth. He couldn't buy back time. Nicholas had once believed control was everything. Yet here he was helpless, undone by a boy no older than 2. He stood pacing the length of the glass walls, his fists clenched. He could feel the walls of his empire closing in on him. Every award, every headline, every skyscraper he owned meant nothing if the boy he had seen on that rainy street grew up believing he didn't have a father. And Emily had carried that burden alone. Nicholas Hale wasn't used to regret. He wasn't used to missing opportunities. But now he realized the greatest opportunity he had ever lost wasn't a billion-dollar deal. It was a family. The next morning, Nicholas did something unthinkable. He canceled all his meetings. He ignored calls from investors. He told his assistant to clear his schedule indefinitely. His world, the empire he had built, was suddenly secondary. He wanted only one thing: Emily. But she was gone. When she left, she hadn't just walked out of his penthouse. She had erased herself from his world completely. No forwarding address, no new number. She hadn't even touched the joint accounts. She had disappeared with the kind of finality that only a broken heart could create. Nicholas spent weeks searching. He hired private investigators, though he hated himself for reducing her life to a file. Each report came back with fragments, rumors of a woman who matched her description in small towns. Whispers of a single mother with a son who had eyes like storms. But nothing concrete. At night, he replayed their past, each memory striking him like lightning. He remembered the first time he had met her, a law student working part-time at a gala. Her laugh had been brighter than the chandelier lights. She hadn't cared about his money or his empire. She had cared about him. And he had ruined it. He thought about the day she left. How arrogant he had been, thinking she'd return. How careless he was, assuming she was bluffing. He remembered dismissing her tears, choosing mistresses over the woman who once loved him enough to build a life. Now, the weight of that choice was crushing him. One night, restless, Nicholas sat at his desk with a pen in his hand. For the first time in decades, he wrote not contracts, not deals, not speeches. A letter. It was messy, uneven, but raw. "Emily, I don't know if this will reach you. Maybe you'll burn it before reading the first line. But I need you to know this. I was wrong. More wrong than I've ever been in my life. I failed you, and I failed him. I can't erase the past, but I would give everything I have for the chance to make it right. Not for me. For him. For the boy who didn't ask for my mistakes but deserves my truth." He signed it with just his name. Not Nicholas Hale, CEO. Just Nicholas. He didn't know if she'd ever read it, but writing it felt like breathing for the first time in years. Weeks turned into months. Each day, Nicholas wrestled with 2 truths: the guilt of what he had done, and the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, he would see them again. And then, fate struck again. A business associate invited him to a gala in Boston. Nicholas almost declined. He hadn't been interested in appearances lately, but something inside urged him to go. That night, under the glow of chandeliers and the hum of violins, he saw her. Emily. She wasn't the same girl who once stood trembling in his office. She was stronger now, her hair tied elegantly, her dress modest but striking. She held herself with a quiet confidence that made Nicholas's chest ache, and beside her 2 little boys, twins. The air left his lungs. His heart stopped. This wasn't a ghost. This wasn't his guilt playing tricks. They were real, his sons. Guests whispered as she entered, heads turning to watch. Emily didn't flinch. She didn't hide. If anything, she looked more at home than Nicholas ever had in these glittering halls. And when one of the boys glanced up, their eyes locked. Stormy gray eyes. His eyes. Nicholas's world shattered. Every deal, every empire, every illusion of control gone in a heartbeat. Because in that moment, he didn't see rivals or contracts or skyscrapers. He saw what he had lost. And for the first time in his life, Nicholas Hale was afraid. Not of losing power, not of losing wealth, but of losing the only thing he had ever truly needed: his family. The gala had never felt so suffocating. Chandeliers glittered overhead, violins filled the air, but Nicholas heard nothing. His gaze was fixed on Emily and the 2 small boys by her side, twins, his twins. For years, Nicholas Hale believed he was untouchable, a man carved from stone. Yet now, standing in the middle of a gilded ballroom, his entire world felt fragile, breakable, and it was all because of two children he had never met. He wanted to move, to cross the room, to speak, but his feet refused. His pulse thundered in his ears. He hadn't felt fear in decades, but this wasn't fear of markets or rivals. It was fear of rejection from the only people who mattered now. The crowd's whispers grew louder. Guests stole glances, murmuring about the uncanny resemblance between the boys and Nicholas. Emily walked forward, her steps calm, measured. Her son's small hands clasped tightly in hers. Nicholas's throat constricted. He couldn't look away. The boys were mirrors of his storm-gray eyes, the shape of their noses, even the way they held themselves. And then, it happened. One of the twins tilted his head curiously and asked in a voice too innocent for such a heavy night, "Mommy, is that the man from your picture box?" A hush swept across the room. Emily's lips parted slightly. She looked down at her son, then up at Nicholas. Slowly, she crossed the remaining distance between them. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud, but it was devastating. When she stopped just a few feet away, Nicholas felt his heart pounding like it hadn't since his youth. "These are your sons," she said, her voice calm, her expression unreadable. The words tore through him. He wanted to speak, to ask, to beg, but all he could whisper was, "Sons." Emily nodded once. Nicholas's gaze darted between them, drinking in every detail, the curve of their brows, the dimple in one boy's cheek, the way their tiny hands clutched Emily's dress for safety. Every part of him screamed undeniable. Something inside him collapsed. It wasn't just shock, it was regret, heavy and suffocating. "I didn't know," Nicholas whispered hoarsely. "You never told me." Emily's eyes glistened, but her voice was steady. "I didn't think you'd care." The sentence sliced through him like a blade. He wanted to protest, to shout that he would have cared, but even as the words trembled on his lips, he knew she wouldn't believe him, and maybe she shouldn't. The boys still stared, confused but trusting. Emily knelt beside them and forced a small smile. "Why don't you go get a juice box? I saw some near the dessert table." They nodded, scampered off, casting one last curious glance at Nicholas before vanishing into the crowd, and then silence. Nicholas and Emily stood alone, years of unspoken words crashing between them. "Why now?" he finally asked, his voice breaking. Emily's gaze didn't waver. "I didn't come for you. I came to show them that I'm not afraid of you anymore." Her words struck harder than any lawsuit or hostile takeover. Nicholas nodded slowly, his chest tight. For the first time, he understood she hadn't come back broken. She hadn't come back begging. She had come back complete, strong, resilient, without him. That night, after the gala ended, Nicholas remained in the empty ballroom long after the guests left. The silence screamed at him. The image of Emily's calm face and the two boys in tiny tuxedos haunted him. When he returned to his penthouse, the emptiness hit him harder than ever. No toys, no laughter, no drawings on the fridge, just silence. And Nicholas Hale, billionaire, CEO, untouchable, was nothing more than a lonely man who had destroyed his own chance at family. But for the first time in his life, Nicholas didn't drown himself in deals or women. He picked up a pen. He wrote, not contracts, not threats, but a letter. He told Emily he understood if she never wanted to see him again. He admitted his arrogance, his cruelty, his blindness. He asked not for forgiveness, but for one chance to know his sons. Weeks passed. He heard nothing. Each day, his chest grew heavier. But he refused to let go of the hope that maybe she would answer. And then, one morning, she did. Not with a letter. Not with a phone call. With a simple email, a time, a place, a cafe by the water. No promises. No expectations. Nicholas flew out the very next day. When Emily walked into the cafe, she didn't smile. She didn't soften. She simply looked at him and said, "You have 10 minutes. Nicholas nodded. He didn't deserve more. He told her the truth. That he had been blind. That he had been selfish. That he had failed her. That he wasn't asking for her forgiveness, but begging for the chance to be better for their children, if not for her. Emily listened silently. When 10 minutes passed, she sat down across from him. "I've raised them without you," she said quietly. "They're healthy. They're happy. I don't need anything from you, but they might." Nicholas swallowed hard, hope flickering in his chest. "You don't get to come and go," Emily continued. "If you step into their lives, you stay. No disappearing. No excuses. If you choose this, you choose it forever." Nicholas's voice cracked. "I'm ready." For the first time, Emily searched his eyes, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. Finally, she pulled 2 folded pieces of paper from her bag. "Your sons drew these," After the gala, she said. Nicholas's hands trembled as he opened them. Crayon drawings. One showed a tall man holding two small boys' hands. The other, a smiling face, labeled the man from the party. Nicholas couldn't breathe. Tears blurred his vision. You can meet them, Emily said softly, but not as their father. Not yet. As a friend. You earn their trust first. When they're ready, I'll tell them the truth. Nicholas nodded, overwhelmed. Thank you. Emily stood, her gaze steady. Don't thank me. Prove it to them. She walked out, leaving him with the drawings clutched in his hands. And for the first time in his life, Nicholas Hale didn't feel like a CEO, or a billionaire, or a king. He felt like a man given a second chance. A chance he would never let slip again. What would you do if the person who broke your heart came back asking for a second chance? Nicholas thought money could buy him anything, but tonight, he learned that trust, family, and love are earned, never purchased. Emily stood strong, raising her sons alone, proving she didn't need him to survive. But now the question remains, can Nicholas prove he deserves a place in their lives? Can a man who once abandoned everything truly rebuild from scratch? This is not the end. It's just the beginning of a story about redemption, about the slow rebuilding of trust, and about whether love can rise again after betrayal.